In our previous lesson, we tried to trace the various reasons that together contributed to earning Muhammad Tughluq the title of the confused genius. Why is it so? We discussed that Muhammad Tughluq was ahead of his times. He was a good sultan and he was also well intentioned. But it is only on account of lack of execution and proper planning that almost all the major projects he implemented ended up in failure. Now, as a quick recap, let us go over the projects that we discussed in our previous lesson. Muhammad Tughluq ruled from 1324 to 1351, and during this period he implemented certain important projects on the administrative front, on the economic front. Now let us quickly discuss what those projects were. His first major project that he implemented on the administrative front was the transfer of capital. During his rule, he decided to transfer the capital of his dynasty from Delhi to Daulatabad. He did so to keep his center of power or to keep his capital safe from Mongol invasion. But while transferring this capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, a lot of people lost their lives on the way. And in fact, even after making it to Daulatabad, many people died because of poverty, hunger, because of homesickness, because of summer, plague. So many reasons killed so many people. Now, soon after, Muhammad Tughluq realized that his decision to shift his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad was wrong, which is why he again ordered a shift of capital from Daulatabad back to Delhi again. And in this time as well, a lot of people lost their lives. Now, this one wrong decision on the part of Muhammad Tughluq costed not just the lives of so many people, but also huge amounts of resources. He lost a lot of money while doing this to and fro movement of the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad and back to Delhi again. So this was a very wrong decision taken on the administrative front. Next, we discussed the issue of token coinage. What was this? By this, coins made of brass and copper were given the value equal to that of silver. But in this case as well, Muhammad Tughluq made a grave mistake. That is, when the coins were being minted by the state, they were circulated without the royal insignia, and for this reason spread mass scale forgery. Fraud coins were being minted by people in their own homes. Now, when these fraud coins flooded the markets, this resulted in economic inflation. So this was another wrong decision implemented by Muhammad Tughluq, and this was on the economic front. After this, we came to the discussion on taxation in Delhi. What happened in this? The Ganga-Yamuna Doab, or the tract of land that lies between the rivers Ganga and Yamuna, was very fertile, which is why Muhammad Tughluq thought that if he increased the existing taxes on the lands in this area simultaneously with introducing new taxes, he would be able to gain and profit huge amounts of revenue. Now, while he implemented this idea, by sheer stroke of bad luck, famine broke out in that area. After famine broke out in the Ganga-Yamuna Doab, peasants were then revolting. This is because they were not able to pursue agriculture, and it was difficult for them to pay the increased taxes, to pay the new taxes that were being implemented on them. So for this reason, Muhammad Tughluq also had to revoke this taxation in Delhi. This also meant a huge failure to him as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty. Together, these three reasons contributed to making him very infamous. And it is this discussion that we had in the last lesson, and we also understood that for these reasons historians have called Muhammad Tughluq the confused genius. Now, in this lesson, we will be taking up another of his projects that he implemented and how that project eventually ended up in a failure. Now, let's find out what that project was. Karachal is a place that is located in the modern day state of Himachal Pradesh. This is Himachal Pradesh and Karachal is located in Himachal Pradesh. Now, between the years 1337 and 1338, Muhammad Tughluq now undertook an expedition to Karachil. So, it was between 1337 and 1338 that Muhammad Tughluq implemented his policy of expedition to Karachil. Now you must be wondering why he undertook this expedition. What were the primary reasons which led him to undertake this expedition? He undertook the Karachil expedition primarily to counter Chinese incursions. To understand this, you should be familiar with the geographical location of Karachil. Karachil lies in the modern day state of Himachal Pradesh. At that time, this place was between India and Tibet, and it is for this reason that Karachil was used as a route to China. Through this route, China was invading India, and so Muhammad Tughluq undertook this Karachil expedition to stop and counter further Chinese incursions on his territories. While he thought of countering and preventing further Chinese invasions, he also had another plan in mind when he undertook this expedition. Another plan that he had in mind was to bring under the rule of his dynasty various refractory tribes that lived in the Kumaun Garhwal region. This Kumaun Garhwal region lies in the modern day state of Uttarakhand, and Uttarakhand is a neighboring state of Himachal Pradesh. Now you should remember this point that during this medieval period, these states like Uttarakhand or Himachal Pradesh did not exist. These are modern day states. Now in this area, in this region, that is in this Kumaun Garhwal region, lived certain refractory tribes. Refractory as in these people were very stubborn and obstinate. They did not want to be under the rule of the Tughluq dynasty. So by launching this one expedition, Muhammad Tughluq had thought that he will be able to kill two birds with one stone. Two birds as in stop Chinese incursions and simultaneously bring under his control these refractory tribes from the Kumaun Garhwal region. But like always, this expedition was also ill-fated. It met failure after some time. Though initially it was some kind of a success, that is, this expedition made success, it failed after a point. Why did this expedition fail? The main reason why Muhammad Tughluq's Karachil expedition failed was the onset of monsoon season. Like always, this time as well, Muhammad Tughluq's troops weren't properly prepared to carry out this expedition during monsoon. Now let us understand what happened, that is, what led to the failure of this expedition in greater detail. I suppose many of you love the rainy season. Why not? This is because you can stay in your homes and you can enjoy the rain that's falling outside. But monsoon isn't always as nice as it seems. This is because monsoon makes terrains very difficult. Roads become very slippery during monsoons, which is why monsoons also make transportation very difficult. It's not very easy to carry on transportation during monsoon. Now this is exactly what had happened to Muhammad Tughluq's troops when they had gone for that Karachil expedition. Because monsoon came suddenly upon them, Tughluq's troops weren't prepared for that monsoon. This mountainous region, that is this Himalayan region, is marked with very steep curves. This is an area of difficult terrains, and during monsoon transportation becomes even more difficult in these areas. Now this was the reason why Muhammad's troops were succumbing to the monsoon, that is, they were suffering huge losses. They were not able to carry on this expedition. In this one expedition, Muhammad Tughluq lost almost all his soldiers apart from Ibn Battuta, who we will come to later. But now Muhammad Tughluq had begun losing his troops, that is, his soldiers were dying. They were not able to perform this expedition. At this point, like always, Muhammad was forced to retreat. Muhammad's troops were now forced to retreat. So they had to stop this Karachil expedition that was supposed to take place here, and they were forced to retreat to Delhi. With this, the Tughluq dynasty incurred huge financial losses because huge amounts of money and resources were required to carry out this expedition. And when this expedition ended up in utter failure, all the money that was spent on this went to drain. This entire expedition, like the former projects of Muhammad Tughluq, was an absolute failure. So this is another reason that contributed to the decline of Muhammad Tughluq as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty. As a quick recap, now let us go over the various projects that we discussed all this while. The various projects that Muhammad Tughluq had implemented and how these projects failed, contributing to his loss of stature as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty. First up on this list would be his decision to shift the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad and back to Delhi again. After this, we come to the issue of token coinage. This token coinage led to widespread forgery and fraud, following which his dynasty suffered huge financial losses. After this, now we come to this new system of taxation in Delhi. When he increased the existing taxes in the Ganga Yamuna Doab, a famine broke out in that area. Due to this famine, agricultural crops had failed. Peasants were now rebelling against him because they were not able to pay those increased taxes, which is why Muhammad Tughluq had to revoke these increased and new taxes as well. So this was another of his projects that ended up in a failure. And the final project we discussed in this lesson is the Karachil expedition. On account of this Karachil expedition, Muhammad Tughluq lost not just a huge number of soldiers but also huge resources. This expedition also ended up in complete failure. A point we raised in the beginning of this discussion as well as in the last lesson is that Muhammad Tughluq was a well-intentioned sultan. He wanted to do good for his subjects, but he was always thinking ahead of his times, which is why he was always in a hurry to implement his ideas. Now the obvious repercussion of this was that these ideas or these projects were implemented without proper planning. These projects were not properly organized and executed, which is why all these projects led to absolute failures. So due to lack of proper planning and execution, all these projects that we discussed ended up in failures. And together, the failure of these projects also implied the failure of Muhammad Tughluq as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty. During his rule as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty, Muhammad Tughluq built many medieval cities, and one such city was Jahanpana. This medieval city was established in Delhi between 1326 and 1327. So, Muhammad Tughluq built this medieval city that was known as Jahanpana. Now, you must be wondering what this word Jahanpana means and in which language is this word located. This word Jahanpana comes from the Persian language. And what does it mean? It means refuge or a sanctuary of the world. Now this must have left you wondering why Muhammad Tughluq out of everything chose to name his city as the refuge or the sanctuary of the world. As in, why did he name his city Jahanpana? Let us find this out. The question we just raised brings us to a discussion on why Jahanpana was built. Now, Jahanpana was the fourth medieval city that was established by Muhammad Tughluq. He did this for one particular reason. Now, in our previous lessons as well, we have been discussing how Delhi was constantly under the threat of Mongols' invasion. So, the sultans of Delhi always tried to protect their dynasty from Mongol invasions. Now, during the rule of Muhammad Tughluq as well, he feared Mongol invasions on his dynasty, which is why he built this medieval city called Jahanpana. Now, Jahanpana was meant to deal with the continuous intimidations that were given by the Mongols. Any person who felt threatened by these Mongol invasions, or any person who felt that they wanted to protect themselves from the Mongols, could seek refuge in the city of Jahanpana. Now this explains why this city was named so. It is because it gave refuge or sanctuary to any person who wanted to save himself or herself from the Mongols. So, Jahanpana was a major medieval city established during the rule of Muhammad Tughluq. Muhammad Tughluq also built certain mosques during his rule, and one such mosque was the Begumpuri Mosque. This was built during Muhammad Tughluq's reign. Now, Begumpuri Mosque went on to becoming the main mosque of Jahanpana. We just discussed that Jahanpana was a medieval city built in Delhi for any person who wanted to protect himself or herself from the Mongols. And this mosque, that is the Begumpuri Mosque, was built as the main mosque of the city of Jahanpana. Now let me ask you a question. Who built the city of Jahanpana? That is, during the rule of which sultan was this city built? Was it during the rule of Ghiyasuddin Tughluq, or Muhammad Tughluq, or Firuz Shah Tughluq? Yes, you are right. The medieval city Jahanpana was built during the rule of Muhammad Tughluq. The discussion we have been having all this while must have left you wondering from where we get so much information on the rule of Muhammad Tughluq. Now for this we have to move back and understand the various chroniclers that were present during the medieval period. One such chronicler and a traveller was Ibn Battuta. In the 13th century, a Moroccan traveller by the name of Muhammad Ibn Battuta left his home at the age of 21. Now it was a hunger for exploring the world, a thirst for seeing new places that propelled Ibn Battuta out of his home at the age of 21, and he began travelling. And throughout his life, he travelled almost around 44 countries. Can you imagine how noteworthy a thing this must have been during the 13th century? Because it was in the 13th century that Ibn Battuta visited around 44 countries. While this Moroccan traveller had set out to exploring the world, he had also visited India. So, it was during the rule of Muhammad Tughluq that Ibn Battuta visited India. Now, Ibn Battuta was a traveller. He had published a book called Rihla. What does this book contain? This book is a travelogue, that is, travel accounts are written in this book. And it is a portion of this travelogue called Rihla that Ibn Battuta devoted to his experience in India. So, the various information on the rule of Muhammad Tughluq or even on the Delhi Sultanate that we get today comes from Rihla, that was a travelogue written by Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta visited India during the rule of Muhammad Tughluq, and he was in India from 1332 to 1346. Between this period, Ibn Battuta had visited India. Apart from visiting India, Ibn Battuta also visited various other countries and places throughout the world. This map shows you the various places that were covered or visited by Ibn Battuta. And you'll be surprised to know that these places were not restricted to just one continent, because Ibn Battuta traveled throughout Europe, Asia and Africa. Out of the various places that he traveled to, few of those places would be Spain, Turkey, Kenya, Arabia, Iran, India and China. Now you must be wondering at the extent of his travel. He traveled in Europe, Africa and Asia. He spanned 3 continents during his visits to these 44 countries. And it is from the chronicles of Ibn Battuta that we get to know so much about the rule of Muhammad Tughluq. Muhammad Tughluq was then succeeded by his cousin, who was called Firuz Shah Tughluq. Now Firuz Shah Tughluq ascended the throne of the Tughluq dynasty in 1351 and he ruled from 1351 to 1388. Firuz Shah Tughluq was a very different kind of sultan under the Tughluq dynasty. Why is it so? Because he wanted his subjects to live a happy and prosperous life, which is why he supported his nobles and the ulamas to rule peacefully. Now this brings us to a question: who were the ulamas? The ulamas were a body of Muslim scholars who possessed specialized knowledge on Islamic sacred law and theology. So in this image you can see the sultan surrounded by these ulamas. These were Muslim scholars who advised on theology and sacred law. Now simultaneously with that, Firuz Shah Tughluq also constructed 150 wells, 100 bridges, 50 dams and many irrigation canals. From this you must have inferred that Firuz Shah Tughluq really loved his subjects. He really wanted his subjects to live happy and prosperous lives, which is why he promoted the nobles and ulamas, and along with that he performed so many constructions so that the lives of his subjects become better. What you see here is an image of Firuz Shah Tughluq holding a rose. This must tell you that he was a really peace-loving sultan. He really loved his subjects, which is why he wanted his subjects to live good and happy lives. Firuz Shah Tughluq was a very kind and generous sultan. Simultaneously with that, he built many constructions, that is constructions in the form of wells, bridges, canals, so that his subjects can lead a happy and prosperous life. But only being a kind and generous sultan wasn't enough when it came to defending his territory. This is because Firuz Shah Tughluq was not a very strong military leader. He could not provide very able military leadership to his dynasty. And for this reason, he was unable to defend the sultanate, that is, defend the Tughluq dynasty from external attacks. External attacks as in attacks that came from foreign powers. Despite being a very kind and generous sultan, a sultan who promoted the growth and well-being of his subjects, a sultan who constructed many good things for his subjects, he was not able to defend his territory. And it was only because of his weak military leadership that this problem occurred. Firuz Shah Tughluq ascended the throne of the Tughluq dynasty in 1351, and it was in 1388 that he died. Following the death of the sultan came a weakening of power of the dynasty. That is, the power of the Tughluq dynasty, the might of the Tughluq dynasty was now slowly decreasing. It was lessening. Why is it so? This is because after the death of Firuz Shah Tughluq, no powerful sultan ascended the throne. But this does not mean that the Tughluq dynasty came to an end with Firuz Shah Tughluq's death in 1388, because the Tughluq dynasty lasted for 26 more years even after the death of Firuz Shah Tughluq. All the sultans who ascended the throne after the death of Firuz Shah Tughluq were insignificant and incompetent. They were unable to hold together the dynasty, which is why their rule eventually paved the way for the collapse of the Tughluq dynasty. Keep this in mind. The Tughluq dynasty did not come to an end with the death of Firuz Shah Tughluq because it lasted for another 26 years. But the Tughluq dynasty was witness to 26 years of incompetent leadership. That is, incompetent, not so powerful sultans now ascended the throne and they were unable to keep the sultanate together. That is, prevent the sultanate from falling into pieces. With this, we come to an end of our discussion on the Tughluq dynasty. Few points that we would have to remember about the Tughluq dynasty would be that it was the third great dynasty that ruled under the Delhi Sultanate. This Tughluq dynasty ruled from 1320 to 1414. In 1320, it was Ghazi Malik who laid the foundation of the Tughluq dynasty following the end of the Khalji dynasty that ruled before this. After Ghazi Malik ascended the throne as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty, he assumed the royal title of Ghiyasuddin Tughluq. So it was Ghiyasuddin Tughluq who was the founder or who established the Tughluq dynasty. He ruled from 1320 to 1324. Ghiyasuddin Tughluq was a good sultan and his rule was founded on the principles of justice and moderation. He made sure that people who lived in his dynasty lived happily and peacefully. Along with that, he also gave importance to law, judiciary, police, postal arrangements, irrigation and agriculture, and together he tried to ensure the well-being of his subjects. After Ghiyasuddin Tughluq, it was his son Juna Khan who ascended the throne. Juna Khan murdered his father in the year 1324 and ascended the throne as the second sultan of the Tughluq dynasty. He also followed a pattern that was similar to that of his father. That is, after ascending the throne, he assumed a royal title. So, after he became the sultan of the Tughluq dynasty, Juna Khan came to be known as Muhammad Tughluq. Muhammad Tughluq ruled from 1324 to 1351 and he has been a very important figure in the pages of history. We learnt the various reasons why he was known as the confused genius. Now, as a quick recap, we should remember that the various projects he implemented and the various projects that ended up in failure were his decision to shift his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad and back to Delhi again, his issue of token coinage, his implementation of a new taxation system in the Ganga-Yamuna Doab, and finally his Karachi expedition. All these projects ended up in failure and together these failures contributed to the decline of Muhammad Tughluq as the Sultan of the Tughluq dynasty. After Muhammad Tughluq, it was his cousin Firuz Shah Tughluq who ascended the throne in the year 1351. Firuz Shah Tughluq was a very peace-loving sultan. He wanted happiness and prosperity among his subjects, which is why he tried his best to ensure a happy and prosperous lives for his subjects. In his court, he was surrounded by nobles and ulamas who were Muslim scholars who gave him knowledge on Muslim theocracy and Muslim law. Along with that, he also constructed many wells and bridges and irrigation canals for the well-being of his subjects. But despite being a good and generous and peace-loving sultan, he was not a very able military leader, which is why Firuz Shah Tughlaq was unable to protect and defend his territory from external attacks. And so, it was in the year 1388 that Firuz Shah Tughlaq died, marking the end of his rule. But the death of Firuz Shah Tughlaq does not mark the end of the Tughlaq dynasty, because following his death, for 26 long years, incompetent and unimportant sultans made it to the throne of the Tughlaq dynasty. Since they were incompetent, they have not been important in the chronicles of history, which is why they were also not important in our discussion. After 26 years of incompetent rule, it was Khizr Khan who formerly served as a governor during the rule of Firuz Shah Tughlaq now came to power. It was Khizr Khan who laid the foundation of a new dynasty. Which was that new dynasty? That new dynasty was the fourth great dynasty to rule under the Delhi Sultanate. That new dynasty was the Sayyid dynasty. So, the year 1414 marks the end of the Tughlaq dynasty and the beginning of the Sayyid dynasty. It is the Sayyid dynasty and the various sultans who ruled under this dynasty that we will be discussing in our subsequent lesson. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.